You wouldn't think that century breaks were far fewer back in the 70s and 80s, but even if you did, you wouldn't expect how significantly less these occurred. The whole of the 1970s saw a total of 173 centuries. This rose to 706 in the 1980s, and the numbers then skyrocketed to 1,678 in the 1990s and 1,857 in the 2000s. According to Q-Tracker, the top 4 century makers alone in the decade of 2010 to 19 have accumulated more than 2,000 centuries between them. So how has this changed so much over the years? It mainly comes down to two things: the change in attitude towards the game and the changes in playing conditions over time. In the 1970s and 80s, according to Steve Davis, it was considered bad sportsmanship to continue on a break where the frame was clearly won and it was unnecessary to make the century. Another reason that came into it as well was that the players often like to intentionally end their break once they have already made enough points and continue to the next frame to try and keep their rhythm going. Enter Stephen Hendry. I won't delve too much about how Hendry changed the game, but one of the key ways he did this was with his table clearing mentality. I doubt Hendry was thinking about century records during his dominance, however he always had the mindset of wanting to pot every ball on the table. This approach has since been emulated and to this day is maintained as the popular way to play snooker. More competitors matching this play style combined with the forever increasing standard of competition equals more century breaks. Considering how Higgins, Robertson and Trump are closing in on Hendry's tally, it really is overshadowed how impressive Hendry's total actually was because of how fewer tournaments and frames there were back in the 1990s. The players mentioned above haven't had the career span of 27 years that Hendry has had, so imagine the numbers they will achieve once their careers are closing. The chief ways that the playing conditions have changed the frequency of century breaks are down to the finer cloths and the lighter balls. More so the former than the latter. Back when it may have been more difficult to get the cue ball to travel across the table will have contributed to the number of centuries made. This would have made it so that there wasn't a lot of one-visit snooker. Finer cloths also make the shots like breaking into a pack a lot easier as well. There's still an argument as to the nature of pocket sizes and if they have become more generous over the years, but that's a whole different situation. When people argue that there isn't an increased standard of play in the post-Hendry era, they only need to look at the centuries per tournament stats, where in the 1990s it exhibited an approximate 7.4 centuries per tournament. This rose to 9.8 centuries per tournament in the 2000s and has only risen since. Centuries are something that are targeted a lot more nowadays, with commentators often mentioning a player's century total as they make them. This is a style of play that won't be going away, especially as players are gearing towards records to make a name for themselves in this era.